You hear these two terms all the time, especially in conversations about the Middle East, Judaism and Zionism, and often they're used like they mean the exact same thing. But are they? It's a question that touches on thousands of years of faith, history, and yeah, modern politics. So today, we're going to untangle this.
So, let's just get right to it. The big question. Is the ancient faith of Judaism the same thing as the modern political movement of Zionism? Well, the short answer is, it's complicated. But by the end of this, I promise you'll have a much clearer picture. Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a solid handle on what Judaism is. Then, we'll look at where Zionism came from. After that, we'll explore that really deep connection between the Jewish people and the land. And then, bam, we'll bring it all together to see how these two ideas really relate.
Okay, let's dive right in. Starting with Judaism, we're talking about a faith, a culture, with roots that go back, way back. So what is Judaism? Well, at its core, it's widely considered the world's oldest monotheistic religion. But it's so much more than just a set of beliefs. It's a whole culture, a shared ancestry. That's why you'll often hear it called an ethno-religion. It's this blend of an ethnic group and a shared faith all rolled into one.
And I mean, the scale of this history is just staggering. We're talking about a continuous tradition that spans more than 3,000 years. It started way back in the Bronze Age and has been evolving ever since, right up to today.
This ancient tradition is built on this incredible library of sacred texts. You've got the Tanakh, which is the Hebrew Bible. At the very heart of that is the Torah. It's got the core laws and the origin stories. And then there's the Talmud, which is this massive, incredible collection of debates and interpretations by rabbis that's been shaping Jewish life for centuries.
But here's the thing. It's not just about what you believe, it's about what you do. Judaism is a full-on way of life. It's structured around 613 commandments, or mitzvot from the Torah, and these commandments guide pretty much everything, from prayers and holidays to everyday ethics, social justice, and even what you eat, which you might know as kashrut.
All right, so let's switch gears and see how this compares to Zionism, which you'll see has much more recent origins. This is where the timeline really starts to matter.
And wow, this timeline really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? The roots of Judaism go back thousands of years, to the ancient kingdom of Israel, and the diaspora, the spreading out of Jewish people, really kicked off after 70 CE. But modern political Zionism, that's a relatively new thing. It popped up in the late 1800s in Europe for very specific historical reasons.
So what is Zionism then? At its heart, it's a nationalist movement. Its whole goal was to create a national homeland for the Jewish people, in their ancestral land. It was really a direct response to centuries of persecution and anti-Semitism, especially what was happening in Europe at the time. And since it was a political movement, it used political tools. Its leaders weren't just making spiritual appeals, they were practicing statecraft, they were negotiating. A perfect example is the Faisal-Weizmann Agreement back in 1919. You literally had Chaim Weizmann from the Zionist organization sitting at a table with Emir Faisal, who was a huge figure in the Arab nationalist movement.
Okay, so if Zionism is modern, where does this whole connection to the land even come from? Well, that connection, that's not modern at all. It's actually woven right into the fabric of the ancient faith itself.
Yeah, that link between the Jewish people and the land of Israel, it goes back way before the political movement of Zionism was even a thought. It's a central idea in Judaism, a core part of the covenant that God is said to have made with Abraham, the first patriarch.
And you can find this promise right there in the Torah, in the book of Genesis. This verse is really the cornerstone of that spiritual and ancestral tie to the land in Jewish tradition. It's a belief that's been around for millennia, long before the political idea of Zionism was ever dreamed up.
And here's something that might surprise you. This ancient connection, it's even referenced in Islam's holy book, the Quran. The Quran actually tells the story of Moses telling his people to enter the Holy Land that Allah has assigned to them. And famous classical Islamic scholars, like al-Tabari, saw this as a divine grant. So there's this shared recognition of an ancient bond.
All right, let's bring it all home. We've defined the terms, we've looked at the history, now let's get into the nitty-gritty of how they relate to finally answer that big question.
So here's the absolute key takeaway. Judaism, an ancient global faith and culture. Zionism, a modern political nationalist ideology. Now, Zionism for sure draws its inspiration from that ancient religious connection to the land. But its shape, its goals, its methods, those are all classic 19th century nationalism. Now, because of that incredibly powerful ancient link to the land, for a lot of Jews all over the world, supporting the idea of a Jewish state, well, it's a huge part of their identity. But
and this is so important to understand, that is not a universal view across the entire Jewish community. Not at all.
The Jewish world is incredibly diverse, and so are the views on Zionism. Sure, most of the mainstream denominations, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, are generally supportive of Israel, but it is not a monolith. For instance, you have some ultra-Orthodox groups who believe a Jewish state can only be brought back by the Messiah, so they actually oppose the modern state. Then you have the traditions of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews whose roots are in the Middle East and North Africa, and their experiences were totally different from the European Jews where Zionism began. And today, you'll find plenty of progressive Jews who make a clear distinction between their religious identity and the political ideology of Zionism. This isn't even a new thing. If you look back, you find movements like Jewish Sufism, which show a long history of shared spirituality between Jews and Muslims.
So let's just recap this with a simple side-by-side. Origin? Judaism is ancient, from the Middle East. Zionism is modern, from 19th century Europe. Their very nature? One is a religion and way of life, the other is a political movement. And their scope? Judaism is global and spiritual, Zionism is national and territorial. They are absolutely intertwined, but they are clearly not the same.
And that really gets us to the bottom line here. You can absolutely be Jewish without being a Zionist. One is an identity, the other is a political belief. And on the flip side, you have plenty of non-Jews, like Christian Zionists, for example, who are huge supporters of the movement.
So, I want to leave you with this question to think about. Now that you know this crucial difference between the ancient, diverse faith of Judaism and the modern political ideology of Zionism, how does that change the way you understand the conflicts, the identities, and the conversations you hear about every single day?